June coming up, and got Father's Day coming up, and so I've just been doing a whole lot of thinking in terms of that, and I wanted to have a few different conversations with a few different men, people that I respect their opinion, their thoughts, and just get some different perspectives. And so, two questions. First is how do you know if you're a good father? How or what kind of determines that? What measures that? You know what I mean? What qualifies it? You know what I'm saying? Because I think there are men who are fathers that are doing what they believe is right, but sometimes even in the eyes of the child may feel like, I didn't get something, I missed out on this, or I did this. So, what qualifies it? Is it the child? Is it something that you did? You know what I mean? And then it leads to the next question for me, which is providing the necessities, food, shelter, clothes, is that enough? To qualify as a good father.
Well, I think how you measure what a good father is there's different stages in life that children go through.
Okay.
And so to measure how good you are as a father comes in stages, but I think the final stage is once a child gets grown and gets out on their own, and what the child says about you, about who you are, and how they recognize you to be, not while they're living in the house with you, but once they're gone.
Okay.
I think then you can really measure what kind of father you are. Like my son has said to me, "You've been nothing but a great father to me." After I was gone from the house. Growing up, he might not have thought that if I had to discipline him or whatever.
Yeah.
But when they understand what you are, who you are, and what you did for them, once they get grown, that's how I believe it gets measured.
Okay.
Now, your second question is, providing isn't enough because most kids need time.
Okay.
A kid would rather have the time with you than for you to give them things.
Okay.
Because if you're spending time, you're giving them what they really need.
Okay.
Because they really need you. And that's the hard part. Even for myself, I recognize that my son probably would have rather had me than getting the child support. He'd rather have me in the house every day than getting the child support and coming over every other weekend. So that provision ain't enough because they don't understand the provision. They just live. So half the time they don't even know they're getting it.
I think that's interesting, man. Because I've had some conversations over the last couple of days, and there are some guys that feel like, man, they can't judge, whether or not they're good or not. But I think the approach that you said in terms of not necessarily in the house, but once they leave, I think that's big because I hadn't heard anybody mention anything like that, right? But hell, I think even going back and just digging a little bit into what you said, hell, if your child can leave the house and go function, then I feel like, that should be part of a qualifier for saying that you at least did some stuff right. Because I guess the challenge is that, ain't no manual. Ain't no guidebook that says, hey man, if you do XYZ, like this thing is gonna turn out just like this. Ain't no golden recipe that I've seen for raising a child, man. And shoot, everybody's child is different, man. Especially people that's got multiple children. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so if you take a one size fits all type of method, hell, you probably gonna end up, making more mistakes than you getting stuff right. Even though your intention may be good, man.
Well, see, what I would have said
What's that?
before was you would measure it based upon the life of the child after the child has grown up would be the success for that. But that's not always true, because you got people that were bad parents, and the children turned out to be very successful.
That's a fact.
So you can't measure it by that. You have to measure it pretty much, because a lot of people want to measure it. Oh, he's a good father. Look at how his son turned out.
Right.
No, you can't do that, because there's some people that turned out great that didn't ever have a father.
That's a fact.
So that's why I say the measurement of it is, what would your child say after they left the house? If they came and said to you or told somebody else, I don't know what I would do if my daddy taught me this. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the thing. I think that's how you have to measure it, is what do your children say about you after the fact?
Okay. Now,
because they're not going to have a lot of good things sometimes to say. Sometimes kids say, I love my dad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
My dad's my best friend, that type of stuff, while they in the house. But most of the time, it's going to be how you affected them is going to come out as they get grown and go through life. Because I think our role as a father is the same role that God plays in our life, to love us unconditionally. He has to discipline us, because like even the Bible says, God disciplines those who He loves.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? If He loves you, He gonna correct you.
Okay.
And so as a father, you got to give correction, and that ain't always popular. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so, but how you do it is the way. If you do it in a loving way, and you explain to them why. And that's the hard part. Like, that's what I used to have to try to do with Malik, is explain why.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to discipline him a lot, because he understood, what the consequences was for certain actions at certain times, certain places you behave a certain way, certain things you do. This is a non-negotiable. You got to make sure you do this, this, and this. But I used to share with him, the more you do and the better you are at something, the consequences are going to be far greater to your good than it is your bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to tell him, if you make straight A's, you probably gonna get money, and you gonna get a lot of different things. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But people don't understand that. Like, when you work hard, you reap good stuff. But when you don't, you see the other side of the negative consequence behind it. So
you just touched on something, and I want to kind of, I guess, explore just a little bit. And what that is just, you said, explaining the why. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, you're a little bit older than me, but we grew up around the same folks.
Right.
And I feel like they might have been a little easier on me than they was on you. Growing up, we didn't get whys. Right. So, I mean, it was, shoot, man, you get beat for asking why.
Right.
Just trying to connect dots and understand stuff. So how did you get to a place where you found the value in, or you discovered that, hey, man, with my son, I need to explain why rather than just do what I say because I said so, do as I say, not as I do type of stuff, you know what I mean? How did you get to that place? Because I'll say for me, in the experience that I had with kids, my early inception was doing it just like people did to me. Right. So all of the kids that came along for a long time, man, do what I said. Well, why? But why? Well, why I got to do this? Or I don't understand. Hey, man, do what I said, man. I don't owe you no explanation. I don't, and you get that kind of like combativeness with it. So how was you able to transition to that?
I was able to transition to that because once I started working, I used to feel like when people would tell me to do something and they would just say, do it. And if it didn't make sense to me, it was hard for me to do it, to complete the task. But if they explained to me why I'm doing it and what the purpose was and what the outcome was going to be, it made it a lot easier because it made sense. So then when it made sense, I was like, okay, we doing this because of this, and this is going to help us in this area. So, yeah, I don't mind doing it. And so the more I worked and stuff, and I started working young, and the more that made sense. And then when I started getting in the Word and started realizing what the Word said and why God said this, it wasn't for to hurt you, but it was to help you. Then I was like, okay, so that's what you need. And see, I learned I made a lot of mistakes in life because I didn't understand why.
Okay.
Some of the things I was doing because nobody told me why. Like you get taught, as a young man, run around with other young dudes and the older dudes telling you, boy, you getting any on you and all that kind of stuff, making you think going out having sex makes you a man.
Okay.
But when you understand why God said, hey, you should be a husband of one wife, because when you understand now, if I don't get caught up in all of this stuff with women, it's going to be I'm going to save myself a lot of heartache and other people a lot of heartache, because I'm only supposed to be with this one person, and I need to find out who this person is based upon God, because if I go start sleeping around with all these women, all these different consequences, you got soul ties, you got chance of getting disease. You know what I'm saying? You start dealing with a lot of consequences. And so I understand now why God put parameters around sex, because he knew once you started having it.
Yes, sir. You ain't stopping, but you ain't stopping, but
once you get that feel. So those type of things of just understanding, like in different areas of my life, starting understanding the why was one of the things that was able to help me say, okay, I need to explain to my son why I want you to do this and why you need to do that. And I can say even to this day, one of the things I shared with him is don't get hooked up into a relationship at a young age when you're not even able to take care of yourself. You can't think about having no serious relationship with some type of woman and you ain't even got your own place and you can't even take care of yourself.
That sound wisdom. Sound advice. Now, you said something too, and this is something that I kind of briefly talked about yesterday, with another person, man. But it's like, what does it mean when you say somebody teaching me to be a man, or you made the statement like, hey man, you got any on you, you know what I mean? Like, people, how did you develop your concept of what a man was? Because, I know your father wasn't completely in your life, right?
Yeah, well, he was totally absent.
Totally. Okay, so where did you pull from, or was it something that you created, right? Because like you said, it's so interesting because you look at all the different influences, like you said, the different men, and men say, oh man, this, and this, and you begin to think certain things are manhood, and this is teaching me to be a man. But like, okay, now you have your own son, you've lived your experience. How did you, one, as you were growing up without your father, where did you pull those influences from, and then based off of those, how did you choose like what you were going to teach your son about manhood? So,
most where I pulled it from is my experiences. So, in the very beginning, my remembrance of my grandfather.
Okay.
because I lived with my grandfather for a while. So some of the things that he did, you know, and then my uncle, because he was instrumental in me being in church and going to church. So those experiences with him, and then just different men that I encountered in church and stuff like that. So it took a while for it all to come together. I created some things, but the major part was doing the opposite of doing what I wanted for myself that I didn't get for myself because my father was absent.
Okay.
So I sort of created certain things, and like certain things I said I was never going to allow to happen for my son because what was allowed to happen to me.
Okay.
But, you know, you don't totally get it right. But then once I started looking at, again, going back to the Word of God, and the more I got in the Word of God, the more it shaped who I became as a father, because then I learned, like I said, how our Heavenly Father treats us. Then that's when you have to, you know, like He gives us grace. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. He loves us. He disciplines us. But he also blesses us. And so, you know, so that was the final shaper. But I took it from guys like Ed. You know, I watched Ed, Thames, Deacon Burke. You know, just people, just being around different men. Joe, you know, when I start being around those men in my early ages, like when Malik was first born, when I got back around the church and stuff, just looking at those guys and talking to them and seeing how they did things.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned Ed, because, you know, what I tell people is that, you know, I got a chance to see things from kind of like two different perspectives. So
yeah,
my biological father wasn't in my life, right? It was kind of sporadic. Then I got my stepfather, who was there, present, did all of the provision stuff,
right?
You know, but it wasn't a consistent connection.
Correct.
Okay, I would say early part of my life, and I can't even tell you like when it split or when it stopped, but I can't remember going to no games. But I do remember, you know, being around them. You know,
we went to like the wrestling match and all that.
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
Doing some of that stuff, going to some of that. Shoot, I remember going out there playing in the cement. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is his trade. And so that, I guess that's a whole nother conversation to explore. But what I tell people is that there's so many different components, because some people say just being there. And at one point, my stepfather was just there. You know, and that's not to knock him or anything like that. However, what I say is that for me, I'm grateful for the people that stood in the gap and you know, colored in, you know, different places in my life that I needed, man, that left impressions on me that were in between those two individuals, right? And so there was a lot of the emotional stuff, things that I feel like, you know, hey, man, this person didn't teach me how to be a man. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, you brought up Ed, and shoot, man, I love that brother, you know, from the bottom of my heart, man, because I felt like I watched him, and it was just so much about how he carried himself, how he was as a man, how he interacted with his wife, his kids, his family, you know what I mean? And so I feel like I learned a lot about just like self-confidence, how to move, and I'm grateful for it because of that. And I think, you know, for me, I always look back, and that's why I asked, like, kind of where do you pull some stuff, because some of the examples that I saw or didn't have, you know, on my spectrum in terms of the two men that, you know, played the role as father in my life, was filled in by other men, just other good men, you know, and other good fathers.
Oh, that's, and something, like I said, like two people that were instrumental in my growth as far as growing up and understanding what I should be doing was, like I said, my Uncle Anthony. At the time, he didn't have any kids, but he handled business. He taught me how to, you know, he taught me how to dress, you know, taught me about getting a car and keeping up with the car and all that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Derek Bass, my cousin, man, he taught me about grooming yourself when I was 13. Wow. Like, you got to groom yourself. You got to make sure you stay clean. You got to smell good. You got to take care of this. You got to take care of that. If you want to be trying to talk to girls, you can't be walking around here sweaty and stinking and all. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, so like I said, man, just I mean, so those are most of the positives. Like you said, like I said, saw a lot of negativity being around a lot of different men, a lot of men, different men drinking and all that kind of stuff. But the one thing about it is I learned a lot from what I saw the negative too, because a lot of negativity where I saw a lot of irresponsibility from men.
Okay.
So when you see a lot of men that's irresponsible, and then you're part of the consequence of that, it made me grow up faster. So I started paying bills and stuff at the house at 14 years old to make sure that we had a telephone, to make sure we had cable, make sure we had lights, because I didn't want the lights get cut off because I like the air conditioning. You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. So.
I always just, always think, sometimes just looking at it, we can paint a picture in our head, and I think being a father is definitely a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think as kids we necessarily appreciate or recognize what the challenge is. Not that we should.
Right.
In the ideal world, yeah, cool, they understand this or they understand that, but the reality is that they're probably not. And, oftentimes I think from what I've seen, fathers are oftentimes overlooked and unappreciated.
Yeah.
But the impact of a father being present, being active, is felt for generations. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I don't know if you've experienced any of that or seen any of that. Like, how do you feel about that? What do you think? Maybe like some reasons or something like that kind of happens.
Well, first of all, one of the biggest things is because fathers, for some reason, because men have been taught not to show emotion, so they don't get the emotional side of it, and so they're not involved from an emotional standpoint with their children. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? They pass it on to the mothers, and so that's the mothers are always there doing everything. So the mama always gets a lot of the credit for a lot of things, but rightfully so if she's the one doing most of the, the caring for, the taking care of, and that's where you go back to talking about the provision. The man goes and provides, but the one thing I think people don't realize when a man is present is that he provides protection. And so I think people don't understand that protection part is key. And when you don't have, like, say for instance, some things that went on in my household when I was growing up, if my father would have been there, I believe some of that stuff wouldn't happen because we would have been protected.
Okay.
So a lot of stuff, man. I think people just take for granted some things because they don't really know, stuff like that. They really don't know what's been given to them when the father is present.
That's big. I mean, I ain't even heard,
Like women know it, like, from a certain standpoint. They understand and know, okay, when this man here, I ain't got to worry about this, and that. Kids don't get to see that because they don't ever have to worry about it.
Right.
So that's why fathers are underappreciated, because unless the mama tell them, hey, if your daddy wasn't here, we wouldn't have this, and, you know what I'm saying?
So some of the stuff that daddies do is not so visible.
Correct.
The impact is great, but the visibility is low, and therefore kids oftentimes, unless, you got parents that are highlighting and acknowledging,
Right.
what they're doing, because I think, from just the men that I've spoken to, most men accept it, man.
Yeah.
They accept that, like, hey, man, it's probably going to go unnoticed, unrecognized, and, overlooked or whatever.
Well, I'll say this. I think it's if you're a father and you're in your household and you're present, I think it's part of the wife's responsibility to make sure that she shows you the appreciation, but she makes sure that the kids show the appreciation.
Okay.
And understand the why, like what your father does and why he's telling you what. So you remember we was talking about when you tell your kids the why, and they and they can get it and understand the why, then they have much more respect for you because they understand you're not just doing it just because you, like you said, I said so.
Yeah. That to me is huge. And I think, me understanding myself when I was a kid, it's my way my mind worked. I don't think there are too many people that would say I was a bad kid.
Right.
Do you do crazy things? Yeah, sure. You get some of the typical stuff, but I was always a kid that I wanted to connect the dots. My mind is always trying to connect dots and just make associations so that I get understanding.
Right.
And I feel like there's a lot of understanding that doesn't take place because, we had generations that were just like, hey, man, do as I say, and because I said so type stuff. And, I do understand in different times, different things are called for. I get it. We got people that are coming out of, maybe generations of slavery and such, and coming all the way up to the point where I ain't got time to explain.
Right.
But I still think that there's a lot that, I think is missed out on that. And so when you come across other fathers, and you see that they got a little bit more of an old school approach where they're taking that and they're meeting resistance from the child who lives in a world where, they can get answers for just about everything. What advice do you give them? What, how do you share with them if you, got any buddies or anything like that that are, probably taking a different route? Because it seems like you have taken a much more, I'm going to say, modern approach to it, despite, the upbringing being more traditional in that approach.
I think one of the major things though is when you relate with somebody, relationships are reciprocal. So one of the things you got to do is you got to learn to listen to your children.
Okay.
And find out what they know and what they're finding out, and then you got to educate them on what's truth. So a lot of times what we fail to do is we try to protect our kids by not telling them what's really true, and saying that's what you can't do. You don't ever want to lie to your children.
Okay.
Because if you lie to them, they're gonna find out that everything you've been saying to them. So that's what happens a lot of times. That's what happened a lot of times, and why a generation like above me, your mom and them, they got lied to a lot.
Okay.
And everything got swept under the rug. And so when they started having to deal with stuff and they found out on their own, they found out the wrong way through experience instead of being told the truth of why, you know what I'm saying? And so what happens is now they don't trust you. And when they don't trust you, they do their own thing. Then they grow up misguided and they don't know how to parent themselves. So that's when I look at generation after generation, even in our family, how things went south. Like we went from a 2-parent household to everybody in our family. After that, like all of my your grandmother, all of them, nobody was ever married. Yeah. In the beginning, before they had kids, like everybody had a whole bunch of kids and never got married.
I ain't never even think about it like that. But
I mean,
how do you? What
okay,
happens?
so
How do you get there?
your grandmama had a kid at 14,
Right.
and 14 or 15, and had 4 kids and wasn't married to their daddy.
Mm-hmm.
My mama, Doopy, had a kid, wasn't married. He wound up having a total of 4 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had 4.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think he didn't get married till he married. Well, he was married to Mary Ann, but
Oh, was he?
yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he was married to Mary. I don't think he married Nadine.
Okay.
Which is Reggie's mama.
Okay.
She's dead, but
what's the name? Mentioned something about Reggie.
And then Tim didn't marry. Him and Bunny never got married, but he only had 1 child.
Oh, they never got married.
Mm-mm.
Man, wow. I didn't know that at all, man. I thought
Bernard didn't marry Janice. Bernard didn't get married till later and married Martha Jane.
Yeah.
But he wasn't married to and then Anthony is the only one that got married and had a child and created a family. Pam got married to Jose after just to keep his citizenship, but she had already had 3 before she got married.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. When you think about it, generationally, think about it. Who in the family had got married? Now you and Keisha, Dorenzo done been married twice, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, but I didn't get married before I had a kid. Monica had kids, wasn't married. Mika had kids, wasn't married. So that's what I'm saying, it just kept going on. But that's because I think our grandparents, like when my granddaddy having a child outside, they didn't talk about the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go through and share with anybody what was going on, why. You know what I'm saying? You be around whole bunch of kids being around a whole bunch of kids, and they learn from each other instead of learning certain things from their parents.
Mm.
So if you don't educate your kids, that's the problem. It ain't about the discipline. It ain't about nothing else, because the discipline comes when you educate them. You understand that sometimes the consequences is enough discipline.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? You ain't got to beat them, because if you tell them, if you do this, like I told you, I used to tell Malik, if you do this, you're going to get good things. If you do this, it's going to be bad consequences. And it could be, but I said, but you got to make the choice, but sometimes you don't get to choose the consequences. But the consequences can be good if you do good. If you sow good, you're going to reap good. But if you sow bad, you're going to reap it. So that's what it is. That's like I told you. I told my nephew, Malik, my stepdaughter, and both nephews, I told them what to do, told them how to do it, and I told them in order for you to be successful in life, you got to write out where you want to be, where you want to go, how you going to get there, using goals and objectives. Only person that did it was Malik. Everybody else, and I told them the consequences. If you don't do this, you're going to wind up in jail, hell, or having babies and struggling. The only person that didn't fall in that category was Malik. He graduated from college. The rest of them, Kiana had a baby out of wedlock. Justin and Jordan wind up spending years in prison.
Mm. Mm. So that's powerful, because I know, you shared that with me over the years, several times as well, man. And I'm grateful, for our conversations that we done had, and just, impact again. Like I said, various people have stood in the gap and just said, hey, man, whether it's something that was learned through positive experience or something that was learned through, was perceived as a mistake, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I always appreciate your willingness to share, and the transparency that you have. And I'm going to ask you one more question.
All right.
Because I'm curious. Biblical scholar, always wondered and looked at this. So, scripturally, Bible says what? Fathers, don't provoke your children to wrath, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not giving full context, please add context. But what does that what does that mean? How do you like, you know, what's your thoughts on it?
Don't provoke your children. So you remember when you was growing up, some of the things that Mud used to do to you that would just keep ticking you off.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's one way.
Okay.
Because, like, say for instance, like you have a father. You've seen it. I don't know if you've seen it, like growing up, being around other like ethnicities, where the father is always messing with the kid and pitting him. You don't do this and you don't do that.
Yeah, just antagonize them.
Yeah, that's provoking a child to rile. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Because you're making a child angry. You're not building them up. You're tearing them down.
Okay.
And so, when you say provoke them to wrath, you know that's provoking a child to wrath. Like, you're not being there educating, teaching, but you're not encouraging, but you're always putting them down and telling them they're not worth anything. They're no good. You know, all that kind of stuff. You ain't gonna be this, and you ain't. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not like you or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So, and then not accepting them and loving them in spite of. You know, you provoke your children to wrath. Like, whatever situation it is. Like, I remember, you know, my desire was that, like, I got a son, I'm gonna be able to, you know, because I didn't get a chance to do some of the things that I know I probably could have done. I said, I got a son now, I'm gonna be able to teach him, and man, when I found out he's autistic and they don't care nothing about no sports, I could have been like, oh man, you don't even play no ball, you don't do nothing, are you? You know, I didn't do that. I just loved him from where he was. And so that's what I'm saying. But sometimes you got parents that, I mean, I've seen it, you've seen it, like on the basketball court.
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm saying? On the football field.
Yes, sir.
So that's that real life example, practical, of people, provoking their kids to wrath.
Okay. I appreciate the insight. If there's any other words of wisdom or just anything that you know.
Man, when it comes to fatherhood and being a father or wanting to be a father or looking at it, it's interesting to say, like you said, how the world sees it. And I think what we've lost, even from that perspective, is how fathers have been portrayed is part of the problem. And I don't think nobody really has a true understanding of what you're talking about, a true definition of what a father is and what his role is really supposed to be. So, in the Greek, when it talks about a man as a husband, that word is really meant house band.
Okay.
Husband, house band. It's derived from a band that goes around the house and keeps everything together. And so what men have not been taught is they've been taught to provide, but they're not been taught that you have such a great responsibility. And the hard part about it is for most men, because they haven't been prepared for that responsibility.
Okay.
Most men, that's why most black men ran from it.
Okay.
You know, because they never, like I look at my father, and I look at, when I asked the question to my mom, like I was wondering, I was like, how did y'all get together like this and that? And I remember her telling me his buddies used to bring him up there to hang out with her. He ain't never had his own. And then he didn't have a father. He's a byproduct of being a side family, which was acceptable back in the day. Like his dad had a family that he took to church, but then he had a side family where he got kids with his side chick. And they grew up knowing it, and accepted it. I remember my little sister, which is just my father's child, on my father's side, telling me when she was in church, she would go up and say to our grandfather, my daddy's father, and she called him granddaddy, and her grandma and mama said, "You can't say that in here."
Wow. Wow. Jeez, boy. You know, I had somebody say something yesterday. It was really powerful, and it was surprising just coming from an individual. You know, I felt like he might have his own, but the word that he gave, like I said, was powerful. It's just that we have to learn to have grace on our parents, man, because sometimes there's just stuff that people don't know.
Yep.
And, you know, the reason I asked earlier, like, what's the qualifier? You know, do you qualify yourself? Do you allow kids to qualify you? All those different things, because it's one of those situations where some people will say, man, yeah, I'm a good father. And they believe it in their heart. And their reasoning might be, well, I did the best I could.
Right.
And reality says that just because you did your best doesn't mean it was good enough.
Or was it really your... See, the other thing is, was it really your best because you did the best from your perspective, but you didn't do the best that could have been done because you could have done some things differently. Like for me, I know I never would walk around and say I'm a good father because the fact that, for the matter of fact, that I allowed a marriage to somebody else to make me sacrifice time that I could have been spending with my child.
Okay.
To be there for him even more. And actually, because I was in a marriage and I was in a difficult marriage, sometimes I didn't want, the times I was supposed to spend with Malik, I didn't even want him to come over because I didn't want to have to deal with her and how she was, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it became to a certain point.
So, I mean...
Not that I was a bad father, but the thing about it is I could have done a lot of things different, a lot of things better. Like I learned this one guy, man, I learned this from this guy at church. One thing that he did, man, he said as long as his daughter's in school, still in high school and all of that, he was not going to get married to anybody until his daughter got to college because he knew he needed to make her first priority. Because he knew if he got a wife, she was going to want to be priority, and he didn't want to have to make that choice.
Well, listen, I think it's a good decision. If he thought it's a good decision, you know, I'm never here to play judge and tell somebody what's right or what's wrong or what's good or what's bad.
Right.
I think, you know, you look at the circumstances and you make the best decision that you can based off the circumstances. And sometimes, you know, we have to be humble enough to recognize that, hey, man, when I look back on this situation after I've gone through it, hey, you know what? I probably could have made a better choice, a better decision in this.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, you know, from what I've seen, just being a man, not necessarily fatherhood, but being a man, you're going to need that. You're going to need some humility to say, hey, man, I can make some better choices here. Now, do I feel like that disqualifies somebody? No. You know, because your role and impact as a father doesn't stop when your child leaves the house. And so, you know, hey, maybe I didn't, you know, get this portion of it right. You know what I'm saying? As a coach, you know, I'll just use a sports analogy. Hell, you might have blew it in the first half of the game. You know what I'm saying? You might have, you know, made some bad strategic moves. I subbed this person, I put this person in, but that doesn't mean that you lost the game. Right. You know what I mean? Your ability to be able to recognize, see and recognize, dissect where you're, you know, making mistakes and then go back and refine and make adjustments. That's going to be the ability to have the greatest overall impact. Right. And I just look at it and I say, you know, don't beat yourself up about that.
So one of the other things I was going to say this in closing for me is when we talk about qualifying as a good father, the major thing was, and I'll just give you this testimony, for me, was the fact that what I shared on the life that I lived before my son made him make a decision to follow Christ.
Okay.
And I was able to baptize my own son.
Oh, wow.
So that was one of the greatest days of my life to dip him in the water. And I didn't make him go up and say that he wanted to accept Jesus Christ as his personal Savior. I remember the day that he did it, and everybody came and got me, because they was like, "Oh, your son came up front and he wanted to join, in teen church, or whatever it was." And I was like, and they were like, "You don't want to come?" I was like, "No, y'all take him through it. That's him. Y'all do what y'all do. That's his decision."
Yeah.
I said he made a conscious decision, and I said, let him articulate what his faith is, why he believes.
And so, as you're saying that, it just makes me think, another thought pop in my head, right? And it's an expression that, you grew up in church, I grew up in church, we've heard it. I can't get to heaven off your relationship with God, right?
Right.
And so, what that just did for me was, it just makes me think that even with that statement, I kind of like take it back and I'm looking at fatherhood, there's only so much, influence your relationship with your child is going to have. Ultimately, they still have to go live their life.
Correct.
And they're going to have to be responsible for themselves. And so, you guide, you cultivate, you enrich as much as you can until, now you're able to go out here and do your thing, man. And now it becomes literally your life, you know what I mean? And you have the responsibility for it, And so, I think, it's fitting, that you said that, like, hey, man, y'all walk him through it, bro. This is his profession. This is this. And at some point, you have to let your child go and become a man or become a woman. And like how, I'll ask you this and I'll let you close with this. What's the process like in terms of that? Because your son's Malik's 27?
He'll be 28 this year.
28, okay.
Yeah. No, he'll be 28 in August.
Okay, so, what's that process like? Because I mean, that's something that I hadn't thought about, like what that is, because you're used to, parenting and just like being able to, again, make adjustments and pull back. And
so you said a couple of key words. You talked about guidance and you talked about responsibility. So what as a parent, what you want to do is, so you think about it, what most people don't know is they don't know the stages of parenthood, because they don't understand the stages of growth of people's lives. So when a baby is an infant, they need constant nurturing, right? They need it. But when they get to a certain age, it's time to let them go, learn how to put on their own clothes, tie their own shoes, eat by themselves, all that kind of stuff. But then when you get to a certain age, like what I'll say, even with your mom, she made y'all responsible to clean up the house, wash clothes, do all that kind of stuff. But that was preparing you all to live a life on your own by yourself. You really didn't know it. But that's why I was saying, if she would have told y'all that, it would have made sense. Okay, you preparing us and not just making us do it because you don't want to do it, but you're preparing us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I didn't appreciate it until I was about 18, man.
Right. And so our job is to make people a responsible adult in this world. You know what I'm saying? To be able to live on your own, and you're supposed to reproduce. So the whole thing about like us making disciples and reproducing, that's the whole thing about parenthood. Your first duty and opportunity to witness and to reproduce and make disciples is in your own house.
Okay. And
so if you teach, that's why I say it's all about teaching, educating, So then they can go out and they can influence others. So it's like you said, think about it, the impact that Ed had on a lot of us.
Oh, yes, sir.
So that impact and that influence should reach multiple people at multiple times. And that's how you reproduce. Like we used to do this thing at church where it was GC3, the Great Commission. So if you mentor 3 people, they mentor 3 people.
Okay.
Then those 3 people mentor 3 people, and how the multiplication of that goes.
Oh yeah, that's a lot. That's
so
a lot.
that's the whole point.
That's a lot.
The effect. So like I wound up having about 20 guys in my class that I taught, and I was like, with all of them, I used to meet with them different times, but I was like, if every one of y'all take and get 3 people that y'all influence, see, then it keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. And that's what it's supposed to be like in parenthood. If you have kids, then they have kids, and you got your you know what I'm saying? And that influence, now you create what we've been talking about is a legacy.